Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now remember, gang, I am off to Chicago in a couple of weeks, and I'm also attending the Adobe Summit in Las Vegas towards the end of March and first day in April, I think it is. So remember, if you are around, I will meet you for a quick chat, hot coffee, cold beer, or indeed whatever your beverage of choice is. It's the least that I can do. And not only that, I just genuinely enjoy meeting people that listen to this show and hearing your stories too. But back to today's podcast. Now, I recently discovered a company called Mad Street Den, which is a computer vision and artificial intelligence company building the AI architecture of the future. But they were founded back in 2013 by a neuroscientist designer duo. And I wanted to find out more about the company's mission to build and deliver AI on scale through meaningful applications to billions of people across the globe. Its visual intelligence platform called Vueai enables the retail industry to reimagine the future with AI. And when I delved a little bit deeper, I quickly found an inspirational startup story where this husband and wife team found themselves working with retailers to deliver more personalised shopping experiences for their customers. Now, the company is headquartered in the Bay Area, California, and they also have offices in Seattle and Chennai, India, which is where Anand is waiting to speak with me today. So before I reveal any spoilers, let me get him on the podcast right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. And thanks again, Neil, for having me on this. My name is Anand Chandrasekaran. I'm the CTO and one of the founders of a company called Mad Street Den. I'm a neuroscientist and a neuromorphic engineer who's turned into, I guess, a technologist trying to build intelligence. And we have a brand named Vue.ai through which we power a lot of our applications that the Mad Stack supports.
Fantastic. And I believe that Vue.ai is actually helping retailers to reinvent themselves for the experience economy. And my understanding is it does that by using AI and computer vision. But before we talk about the technology, can you give me a bit of an overview on the kind of problems that you set out to solve with it?
Let's put it this way. I didn't start Mad Street Den to help the retail world. So we ended up doing that, definitely. But Mad Street Den was formed with a slightly more general goal of building a stack that would capture the kind of intelligence that me and one of the other founders, Costa Colbert, we wanted to build. So we both come from a neuroscience background. And we wanted to build a stack where we could bring the kind of neural algorithms that we were studying and solve problems with it. Now, obviously, when starting a company with such a general goal, investors and others pretty much very quickly shut us down and said, hey, you can't build a platform with no application. Nobody's going to believe you. So in the course of our initial experiments when trying to find out how to best showcase what the stack could do, retail happened to us as opposed to us happening to retail. Vue.ai was created out of us finding that the synergies actually existed and that we could get a long way in our goals towards building Mad Street Den by learning how to solve the problems that the retail world has. So the stack, the Mad Stack, is meant to be a platform that can find all kinds of patterns from a lot of data. And when provided the right context, it can use that to make decisions. It would be a stretch to say it does that similar to what humans do. We're a ways away from that. But it definitely does help in making certain decisions by observing what humans are doing. And so if you take that general principle and then you look at the problems that the retail world is facing, particularly with the amount of data that's flowing through, the kind of interactions that both the people who set the retail world up and the people who use the retail world, meaning the end consumers, and finding all those relationships and patterns, we found out that the stack could be useful. And so we built a bunch of wrappers around the stack, which we call products, and sell them through Vue.ai.
And you did say when you first set out, you didn't set out to help the retail industry. So can you tell me a little bit more about the story behind the company and how you and your wife actually began taking science from the lab to working with retailers to deliver these more personalized shopping experiences for their customers? Because it sounds like there's a huge story there.
Well, I don't know if it's huge, but I'll see what I could do and see whether I do it any justice. I come from an academic background. I thought I was going to be a professor of neuroscience, or I was going to be building chips that emulate the brain, all of that kind of stuff. So good stuff, good work. I did my PhD in neuroscience at Baylor College of Medicine, went on to do my postdoc in the Brains in Silicon lab at Stanford. So we were doing some pretty cool stuff. The problem with the academic world is, of course, the gestation period for getting your ideas to really have an impact is a bit longer. And the ideas that we were working on always felt a little bit more constrained, either by funding or by scope. They felt a little like toy problems. Not to say that lots of that good work isn't done in academia. It is, but in this particular field, we felt that we could have a larger impact if we came out into the world and tried to do it through the marketplace. Of course, I didn't come up with this myself. And the story behind that part is, the way I say it is that while I was putzing around trying to figuring out how to build intelligence, Ashwini, who's my wife and the CEO of the company, hit my head and said, if I leave this to yourself, you'll never build anything. So while of course a little bit of that is made up, there's a large grain of truth over there, in the sense that as an academic, you don't have the same perspective when it comes to building products. And Ashwini, who comes from a product and design background, and also having worked in the corporate world for about a decade, brought to the story essentially a little bit of direction and strategy, and so she convinced us to say, okay, let's actually try to build a company where we try to solve the problems first rather than building the technology first. And so it's the journey has ended up being a little hand in hand, where a little bit of the stack was built out of more pure theory, but it's always been validated by throwing it out into the world to see what kind of an impact it could have. And I'd like to say that in a way, this is kind of how we behave as humans as well, in the sense that you're built with a scaffold that could support intelligence, but it is through your experience with the world. You have sensory motor feedback, and by exploring the world as children, you essentially reaffirm the model of the world that you're building inside your brain, and that allows you to then do more sensible things and become an intelligent human.
So ultimately then it was your wife hitting over the head, and also your scientific background that played this big part in developing the most advanced retail AI and computer vision solution for brands around the world. I mean, it's a great combination, but is that what set you up really, do you think?
That definitely plays a huge role. Yeah. And the science behind it, the algorithms that we're writing are definitely crucial in solving the problems. But the journey has taught us that they play a minor part, crucial but minor, because at the end of the day, building a company has a lot to do with people, organization, engineering, and a whole bunch of other things that you never considered important as an academic or a scientist in actually bringing it to the world. So while yes, definitely the science matters and the algorithms matters, having the right ideas matter, it takes such an organizational feat to put a company together and actually have it execute to make anything real. So and that journey has been far more brutal than trying to qualify for your exams or something like that.
I completely agree with everything you've said there. And I think sometimes we do concentrate too much on the technology and not enough on all the other stuff that you mentioned there. But as this is a tech podcast, can I just ask that you tell me a little bit more about the company's neural network of products and how that alleviates these time-intensive tasks, especially such as manual data entry and inventory management, and how much time that can actually help people save?
Sure. I'm going to deviate a little bit.
Sure.
It's not as if it's one neural network that solves all the problems.
Yeah.
And just as with your brain, what we've built is a whole host of subsystems that have to work together. To solve anything complex, you have to orchestrate a lot of moving pieces, a lot of technology primitives. And when I say primitive here, I'm talking about entire neural networks or architectures and putting them all together to actually solve the problem. Now, so the way we approach solving problems is essentially, and through the math stack, we're able to do this very quickly, is we can orchestrate a lot of technology primitives towards solving a problem. And our approach towards solving our customers' problems, so in the case of inventory management, is we are able to, one, automate the process. And when I say automate the process, we're talking about being able to generate the kind of structured information that humans are trying to create, and do so in using deep learning and so on and so forth as primitives. But that doesn't solve the problem itself, because it's going to be only as accurate as the data that's fed into it. And you have to feed a lot of data into typical deep learning networks to solve the problem. So it doesn't get you through to the entire process. You then have to merge it with other pieces of technology like reinforcement learning. And so you bring reinforcement learning into play so that you can have humans in the loop that are providing things like course corrections. So what would normally take, let's say, a human 100% of his or her time to enter information. So they're looking at a large body of unstructured information. Say it's an image, it's a bunch of text or descriptions given to them by, say, a vendor, and they have to convert that into their taxonomy, into the retail world. They have to pore over all of this data, make decisions, and fill that out. Now, the time it takes them to do that can be shortened significantly by something like, say, 10x, because now you have machines that are looking at what they're doing, extracting the same kind of information, and you've reduced their job to telling the machine when it's getting something wrong. And you do that by a combination, of course, of them providing a little quality control into this. But then you have to take that feedback, plug it back into the system, and have the system react almost instantaneously so that it's learning on the job. So the essential way to solve a lot of the problems in this world is not to say that machines are going to take over the world and automate everything. It's to find the right balance where humans are providing context and being aided in the job and aiding machines to do their job. And in that balance, you'll find that you can save them 90% of their time in what they were doing, and get them to the finish line with a lot more consistency, and a lot less pain and suffering in doing mundane, repetitive work.
And am I right in saying that the technology that you're using now right across Vue.ai and how it's actually helping you solve problems, it wasn't available until now, or certainly much more recently? Is that right?
That's not entirely true, okay, in the sense that the algorithms that we're talking about, at least the basic elements of it, stochastic gradient descent and so on and so forth, neural networks have existed for decades. The theory behind most of these algorithms have existed for decades, but there's been a combinatorial explosion that's happened. One, in terms of the compute power to try out these experiments and to build large enough systems that you can do a lot of work, crunch through a lot of data to actually make this useful. So the basic mathematics behind everything that's working right now existed, but nobody could validate it because they couldn't build a system large enough to actually test it. They didn't have large enough sets of data to actually train it. And now that you can do that, the development of these technologies has accelerated. So to make it practical, people have essentially been able to do a ton of experiments much faster so they can iterate on the basic architecture and designs. Going back to the same principle that I was talking about, it's not one neural network or one method that's going to solve your problem. It's going to be a whole host of those techniques put together the right way. But to get a whole host of techniques and put them together the right way, you need to do a lot of experimentation. And nobody has ever had the compute power to do that much experimentation and advance the science until recently.
I can't tell you how refreshing it is to hear you say that, because I think very often all we hear is about high-level solutions. But like you said there, it isn't just as simple as saying tagging AI or machine learning on. It is that host of a range of techniques that will help solve your problems, and there isn't just one fix for everything. And if we were to take a step back from the technology for a moment, one of the things that really excites me about what you're doing there is I read that you have 50% of women in your workforce, with many at the executive level, because I think that's so refreshing to read. So can you tell me more about how you were able to achieve that, and also how your company is so much better for doing just that too?
Sure. So let me just step back a little and say in the quest for diversity, it's not only about gender. It's about being open to all diversity. It just so happens that gender is the one that definitely hits you in the face as one of those that are worse off, right, in terms of its representation. Now, any problem that you try to solve, I think this is pretty standard knowledge that the more minds, the greater the variety of views you have that are looking at a problem, the more likely that you are to find a more robust solution to solving a problem. So it should stand to reason that most companies should be organizing themselves to have sufficiently diverse workforces that they're helping themselves. I mean, we talk about genetic diversity being a necessity for mankind to survive. Yes. So why is that not true about the workforce? So again, I'm not saying anything new there. That should be common sense, and people should be applying that. Now, how do we do it? How does it work for us? I think it isn't specifically that we are looking for diversity, but if you keep yourself very open to that and aware of that as a fact, these balances will find themselves. So I know that sounds a little abstract. So making it very real. When it comes down to hiring, if everybody is aware that we should be making sure that we should be open to candidates of all sorts, then you are more likely to entertain the idea that a candidate can actually get a little further, and you probe them for other parts in the screening and the testing of what you're looking for, that you actually find, okay, you know what, they can be valuable members to the team, and you should be taking them in and trying to build a team using them. As opposed to screening them very early on and creating an artificial bias just because you don't know how to screen them well.
I completely agree with you on that as well. I think something that I'm noticing more and more is businesses are waking up to the fact that their audience or their consumers are incredibly diverse. So if you don't have a workforce that is as diverse as your own audience, how can you meaningfully serve them? But
there are systemic problems that we have to overcome, of course. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. And the fact that there is an underlying bias in the candidate pool set does mean that this is not something that is going to get solved overnight. But it will definitely start with people keeping an open eye and making sure that diversity is nourished because it's useful to the company, as opposed to diversity for the sake of diversity.
Absolutely. And as someone that's scaled your platform since launch in 2016 to power commerce in over 180 different countries for brands such as ThreadUp, Levi's, Macy's, and I could go on and on. For any startup founders listening, are there any lessons that you learned along the way that you would think would be really valuable to a startup founder at the beginning of their journey?
Oh, wow.
That's a big question.
There are simply too many. It's a grueling journey. And I do know that a lot of people seem to breeze through it and come out of it saying, yes, this was an amazing journey and everything just worked out and stuff like that. No, it's brutal. Every mistake feels painful, and you have to grow through it. As far as lessons go, I think if I would like to pass anything on in terms of the journey, I would say that early on, being able to have trusted members of the team who complement your skill set is kind of critical. I'm saying this from the side of not having that and having paid the price for it. There were gaping holes in our capabilities, right? So Ashwini and I come from particular backgrounds, and when it came down to building a company, there were gaping holes in our knowledge base about how a company would need to run. And these holes hurt us because either we hired the wrong person, or we didn't know that this was a gap and the company should be considering certain things. These kind of things actually hurt your growth story a lot. And so finding a team that complements you, and very specifically people whom you can trust who fill in that void is I think the most critical part. And once you've done that, then everybody in the team can start training the next batch, delegating that job that they were serving initially, and keep growing as an organization. So if you don't have that balance set, and if you don't train the next layer, you can't grow. And that's the most painful lesson we learned.
Excellent advice. And last year, of course, you raised $17 million in funding. So can you ask that you tell me a little bit more about how that's going to help you move forward, and also what's going to be your big focus this year?
Sure. A point from your previous question, which is we are a global company. We have customers all over the world. Running that kind of an organization can be pretty expensive and difficult. So we managed in our early days, by running ourselves ragged and being on a plane all the time, all that kind of stuff. So good stuff, but not sustainable. One of the biggest reasons you need to raise more capital is to stabilize your operations across the world, and being able to have geo-specific pods that know the customs, know the people, know the way business is done, and can navigate the environments over there is one of the places where we're going to be expanding a lot, and that definitely is one of the reasons for the use of funds. But as a small company, we definitely had holes all over the place, whether it's technology, sales, marketing. They're all getting filled and enabling us to grow it at a more sustainable pace in a way that doesn't, destroy you as a founder.
And I'm conscious we have covered a wide range of topics today in our relatively short conversation, and I think it might leave people with even more questions. So for those people, can you just point them in the best direction of finding out more information about the kind of thing that you do, and also how people listening could contact your team if they've got any questions?
Sure. So the best way to reach us is the Vue.ai site in terms of information, and there's contact information there for how to get in touch with the team.
Excellent. Well, I'll add all those links to the podcast show notes so people can find you nice and easily. But I wish you the best of luck for the future, and a big thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. I know it's late over there in India at the moment, for coming and joining me today. Thanks again.
Thanks, Neil.
I just love the story behind how the company is helping retailers reinvent themselves for the experience economy using AI and computer vision. But I also love how he formed the company with his wife, and how, as a team, they went about taking science from the lab to working directly with retailers to deliver those more personalised shopping experiences for their customers. And I could just listen to stories like that all day long. So a big warm thank you from the UK to you, Anand, and your lovely wife too, of course. But more so you, Anand, for joining me on the podcast. And remember, you can find more stories like today's with over 1,100 podcast interviews over on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. And you'll also find links to my social channels at the bottom of my site. And you can also email me directly, techblogwriter@outlook.com, if you need me for anything else. But that's it. we're out of time. But have no fear, I'm warming up already for tomorrow's episode. So I'll see you again tomorrow. Don't be late. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.